Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Greetings to you all on the occasion of Hepatitis Day. Welcome back to the fifth and the last day of our Hepatitis Week special workshop on patient management. In the previous 4 days, we had amazing discussions with Dr. Shiv Joshi sir about biomedical aspects and clinics, Dr. Ravi Kant Tiwari sir on prescription writing, Dr. Savita Agarwal ma'am, and Dr. Ravi Shankar Gupta sir on sample collection and proceeding in a case of hepatitis, and Dr. A.K. Anuragi sir on medical management of a patient of hepatitis. As previously stated, you can drop your questions and doubts to our guest speaker in the comment section. This evening, I, Sneh Sahani, and my friend Harsh Srivastava here to host the last discussion of this workshop on surgical outlook of a patient with hepatitis. And for the same, I would like to welcome the most knowledgeable, wise, and experienced Dr. Shalabh Gupta sir, Professor and HOD, Department of Surgery, Santosh Medical College and Hospitals, Ghaziabad. He is also an ex-IMA Council President. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Sneha. So today is World Hepatitis Day, and as we are facing through a very difficult phase of life, which is because of the corona, so many things of hepatitis precautions and management of hepatitis, they resemble today's scenario of coronavirus also. So as far as the three deadly diseases like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV is concerned, now we have got the fourth deadly disease in the form of COVID-19. Practically, the precautions that are going to be taken for all these four deadly diseases is the same. So we have to join a habit. This habit has to be inculcated in our domain so that we can take care of ourselves. We can't have any kind of medical support for these diseases. Just the precautions which are there are more than important. So that's why we have to take precautions. So these are basically uses, and now these are the precautions that are known as universal precautions. So that's why we have to be very careful while dealing with these diseases. So as you say, can I start the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You may start.
Okay. Thank you very much. So hepatitis is a major public concern which is affecting around 10 million cases worldwide. And India is hyper-endemic for hepatitis A virus, as we all know, after the introduction of these Kumbh Melas and all sorts of melas where people have a holy dip. There the rise of hepatitis A actually happens. So annually in India, we have got 1 to 2 lakh of people who die due to illness related to hepatitis B. And the worldwide estimate is 170 million people are infected with hepatitis C today. It's a common problem among all the healthcare workers and the patients. So the problem with us is that these patients who come to us, they are suffering from hepatitis, and not only this, the person who is operating on them, the person who is treating them, he may also be suffering from hepatitis. So it is not a one-sided event that you can get as a healthcare worker infected with hepatitis, but you can also infect your patients also if you are not dealing with them properly. Viral hepatitis is basically now known to be having around 6 kinds of hepatotrophic viruses, ranging from hepatitis A to hepatitis G now. And surgeons of all fields are at particular risk of acquiring and transmitting some of the viruses from and to their patients. So there are great concerns about the potential transmission, and unfortunately, specific immunoprophylaxis for viral hepatitis is presently limited to protection against hepatitis A and hepatitis B viral infections only. So we are just left with some high degree of vigilance, careful surgical techniques as the only means available to prevent the transmission of these relative to the surgeon. Hepatitis A is a 27 nanometer single-stranded RNA virus. The majority of acute HAV infections are subclinical. The hepatitis A infection do not progress to chronic liver disease. So that's an added point here. And it is spread through fecal contamination of food or drinking contaminated water. But the feces of the infected individuals tend to contain the virus for almost 2 weeks period prior to the onset of illness and perhaps as long as 3 months thereafter. So that's why it is very important to take care of these possibilities, because these patients can transmit the virus up to 3 months after the illness. Healthcare workers in hepatitis A scenario, nurses are the strongest at risk because their responsibility of taking care of the bedpans and the responsibility of changing the diapers in ill patients. But till now, no surgeon has been reported with hepatitis A infection because of the patients, and there are no reports of the surgeons transmitting HIV to the patients also. So that's why this virus is comparatively safer, and we are not actually infected with these kind of viruses, and we should not worry about these things. But obviously, if the disease progresses more, then we can have a fulminant hepatitis A also. So we have to be careful there. For the diagnosis of hepatitis A, we have got such kind of things like positive IgM antibodies, which are known as IgM anti-HIV. They indicate that the person has been infected within the past 3 to 6 months, and shortly after the appearance of IgM anti-HIV, IgG antibodies, which are IgG anti-HIV, known as total anti-HIV, appears in the circulation. And unlike IgM anti-HIV, the IgG antibodies persist for decades. That indicates long-standing immunity. So automatic immunoprophylaxis occurs after the infection. So nothing to worry much. Treatment is just supportive, and the cases, they resolve with good bed rest and lots of proper intake of food with avoiding of fatty foods. In those rare cases which progress to fulminant hepatic failure, liver transplantation can be considered. But in hepatitis A, both passive and active immunoprophylaxis is available. Hepatitis B, on the other hand, is a 42 nanometer long virus with an incubation period of 30 to 180 days. This incubation period is important because once you are infected from a hepatitis B patient, you should know when the test of yours is to be done. The presence of hepatitis B surface antigen, which is known as HBS. HBS stands for surface in the blood, indicates the presence of hepatitis B infection. Antibodies to hepatitis B, which are known as anti-HBS, indicate some immunity to HB infection has developed. The antibody to hepatitis B core antigen, which is known as anti-HBC, C stands for core antigen, indicates that the individual has been exposed to the intact hepatitis B virus at some or the other time in their life. So all these indicators are there, which will tell you. Apart from those indicators, there are some more indicators like IgM anti-HBC, which shows that the exposure to the intact virus has been there within 6 months. And then there is a anti-HBC also, which indicates exposure to the intact virus at some time in life. And then there is a early antigen also. This is another indicator which shows that the patient is under active viral replication. And anti-HB shows that the virus is now not replicating. So if a patient is having these kind of things like HBE and anti-HBE, this is a very, very confusing state. So in those cases, we have to get the DNA of the patient. If the DNA is more than 10 to the power 5 copies per ml, that means that the virus is in active mode, and you have to be very careful in dealing with these patients. So whenever you are going to operate these patients, we need to have this kind of thing. Otherwise, if the antibodies have been developed and this is very nominal and very minimal, that means we can safely operate this patient and safely handle this patient. So just by getting a hepatitis B card test done and it comes out to be positive, we should not send these patients out to a referral center. We can hold them, we can treat them very easily, but we have to be cautious about the different type of markers that are involved. And once these markers are in the controllable limit, we can obviously treat these patients. Nito, what happens is that most of the time, as soon as we get a hepatitis B, hepatitis C or HIV patient, we get scared and we get into the process of sending this patient out or referring this patient out to some other center or some higher center. The prevalence of hepatitis B is basically 3 to 5 times higher than the general population in healthcare workers. So the annual rate of hepatitis B infections which occur in healthcare workers ranges between 0.5 to 5% as compared to the general population, which is around 0.1%. There is higher risk in urban hospitals and tertiary care centers, and those at highest risk of infection are obviously the surgeons, surgical house officers, laboratory technicians, blood bank workers, all the assistants in surgery, pathologists, and anesthetists also, along with all the healthcare workers. In the surgical community, orthopedic surgeons and gynecologists and dentists have got the highest rate of getting infected by these kind of hepatitis B. The spread, you all know that it is a maternal infant transmission, which is the most common spread. Apart from that, these patients who are into parenteral drug abuse, and then during surgery, if there is a needle stick injury, those patients can also get infected with hepatitis B. So the exposure to the patient blood or body fluids, body contaminated sharps, they are also very much valuable in creating hepatitis B infection. And most of the time what happens is while we are operating in the OT, the glove has torn apart. So if the glove has torn apart or there is a small hole in the glove, that may lead to deposit of blood inside the glove and your finger is in direct contact. So long duration of the operation, use of blood products, unsafe sexual practices, especially in homosexuals, and those who are going for tattoo and skin piercing also, there also this kind of risk is there. Even when you are going to a barber and you are getting your beard shaved, in those cases also there is high chances of infection of hepatitis B and hepatitis C if the razor and the equipments which are used by the barber are not sterilized. So that's why there is a huge risk at the barber shop also. Forget about all those things, but it's a huge risk. So for hepatitis B, both active and passive type of immunoprophylaxis is available. So we are lucky that we can deal with hepatitis B very easily, but we have to be vigilant. Passive immunization can be there in the form of hepatitis B IG, that is immunoglobulin, and the active immunity can be there with the hepatitis vaccine that we all are taking. And if you have not taken, you should always take this vaccine because it is very essential for the healthcare worker, especially the doctors and the sisters, that they should approximately this vaccine at the time 0. So we are
Sir, you're not audible. Okay. I guess there's some technical issues, so we'll be joining soon.
Okay, sorry, I was. Sir will be joining very soon. I would like to inform you that today it is World Hepatitis Day, and on this occasion we had been organizing the workshop for the last 5 days, and we discussed various topics. On the first day, we discussed on we had a lecture on bioethics by Dr. Shiv Joshi. On the second day, there was a lecture on prescription writing by Dr. Ravikant Tiwari. On the third day, we had a lecture on the lab proceedings of microbiology and pathology, and by Dr. Savita Agarwal ma'am and Dr. Ravi Shankar Gupta sir. On the fourth day, Dr. A.K. Anuragi sir discussed the management of patient of hepatitis, and today is the last day of the workshop where we are discussing the surgical outlook of a patient. So stay tuned. Sir has had a little network issue. He will be joining very soon. Okay,
Sir is here.
He's here. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so sorry for the technical glitch, but can't
Sir,
help.
please,
Yeah.
you may continue, sir.
So I was just telling that the booster can be given at 5 years, and antibodies of more than 50 international units and perhaps more than 10 international units should be considered protective and indicative for long-term protection despite weakening or loss of antibody titers over time. So that's why it is very important that these patients who are basically healthcare workers can have antibody titers done at every 3 to 5 years interval so that they can know whether the booster dose is needed or not. But suppose you get infected with hepatitis B, a patient who has been operated, and you get some needle injury or you get a cut. So if you are vaccinated before and you know about your titers, then we don't need to do anything. We don't need to worry at all. But especially if you are not immunized, then the problem will occur, and then you have to take the full course of hepatitis B vaccine also, and then you should always also take the immunoglobulin in at day 0 and 1 month post exposure. So antiviral therapy for healthcare workers who seroconvert from negative to positive as a result of recent exposure should be withheld until the individual has been documented SAG positive on 2 occasions on a minimum distance of 6 months apart. So if you get infected, that means you have to get one test done after 1 month, and if it comes out to be negative, don't have to worry. You go for second test at 6 months, and then if that is also negative, then you don't have to worry. But if at 6 months interval that test comes out to be positive, then it is a cause of concern, and thereafter you have to be on some antiviral drugs, which are basically tenofovir, adenovirine, and lamivudine. Along with the requirement of the severity of the disease, you may need interferon, and in terminal cases you can also need a liver transplant. So it is very essential to take care of the hepatitis B vaccination. That is the only thing which can protect you for your future life. Hepatitis C, on the other hand, is a 60 nanometer virus with an incubation period of 14 to 180 days. And the diagnosis of hepatitis C infection is mostly based on a positive anti-HCV in a patient with a history of viral exposures, like they have been given blood transfusion or intravenous drug use has been there with elevated enzymes. But HCV RNA, it presents within 2 weeks of infection. HCV has a high propensity to progress to chronic liver disease. So that's why it is now becoming one of the very common indications of liver transplantation. But still, the progress in this disease is the mortality is also high and the morbidity is also high, because the risk of cirrhosis, it increases by the severity of the disease you may need every decade. The spread of hepatitis C is through blood transfusion, parenteral drug use, needle stick injuries, sexual proximity and homosexual contact, and maternal infant transmission occurs in almost 5% of the births. So if a healthcare worker is exposed to hepatitis C, he has to be now screened for anti-HCV, tested by PCR at 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months from the date of injury. And if HCV RNA is detected and remains positive for 3 months, antiviral therapy with standard recombinant or perhaps pegylated interferon plus ribavirin for 4 to 6 months has to be started. So immunoprophylaxis is not there, so that's why you have to be very careful. And if you are tested positive, then you have to start with this ribavirin along with interferon regime. Then there are some more viruses like hepatitis D or delta hepatitis is basically a defective single-stranded RNA that cannot survive on its own. So it needs hepatitis B to replicate. Incubation period is 2 to 26 weeks. And these patients are basically chronic carriers of hepatitis B. So that's why they are always risk for transmission. Source of infection is again the same. And hepatitis D infection is only possible if a patient is infected with hepatitis B. So with both viruses at the same time, basically. Hepatitis B is diagnosed by the presence of high titered antibodies to hepatitis B, which is known as anti-HDV, in a patient with serological evidence of hepatitis B infection, which is in the form of surface antigen, HBsAg, or IgM anti-HBC positive. So these infections, they have got almost the same kind of spread, and the treatment of HDV infection is as outlined for hepatitis B infections. In that, of the latter will result to clearance of the former. So that means they go hand in hand. So if hepatitis B is cured, then hepatitis D also it vanishes. While passive and active immunoprophylaxis against hepatitis B in hepatitis B susceptible individual will also protect against hepatitis D infection. So there is no effective HDV immunoprophylaxis for established HBV carrier. So if the patient is still infected, then you can use interferon. Otherwise, once hepatitis B is cured, this virus also goes away. Hepatitis E is a RNA virus with an incubation period of 15 to 64 days. It has also got a fecal-oral transmission route. Source of infection is contaminated water, poor sanitation. So that's why it is more found in Asia during melas and Africa and Mexico. It is common in adults and severe in pregnant women. A positive anti-HEV test is used to establish the diagnosis. And like hepatitis A virus, hepatitis E does not cause chronic liver disease, but definitely spreads with fecal and oral transmission. Hepatitis E usually resolves within 4 to 6 weeks time. So that's why the treatment is always supportive, and antiviral therapy is hardly required for these patients. But same as hepatitis A, if it becomes fulminant, then these patients may even lead to require a liver transplantation. Passive immunoprophylaxis for hepatitis E is yet to be developed, but hepatitis A has got prophylaxis. So that's why it's not a big problem. Now, recently a new virus has come in the form of hepatitis G, and the diagnosis is basically present hepatitis G RNA in the serum. It has got, of course, a nosocomial transmission, and it has been limited to mainly dialysis settings. Although this virus studied too much, but it is known as an orphan virus because it does not have a symptomatology of its own. So all these patients who are concomitantly infected with hepatitis B or hepatitis C, if they are tested for hepatitis G, you come to know they are having hepatitis G also. The route of transmission is also like blood transfusions, unsafe sexual practices, intravenous drug users, maternal infant form of transmissions are there. So these viruses, hepatitis, all viruses can be transmitted from the patients to healthcare workers and vice versa. Hepatitis is a common and dangerous infection to surgeons. So what we need for today is greater awareness of the viruses, like the whole IMA MSN group is doing this awareness, and there are so many people who are now connected and they are themselves aware, and they will spread the awareness further also. So that is the motto, so that more and more are saved from this deadly virus. So we have to know how to minimize the risk of transmission, how to give the best defense for healthcare workers and other high risk groups and patients also. And this type of does not stop in the medical college only. This has to be spreaded to all the community workers in the schools, for children, for families. So everyone should be vaccinated with hepatitis B. Some of the statistics I brought for you, that cuts and stick injuries may occur in around 15% of the surgeries, which ranges from 1.7 to 15%. And surgeons and the first assistants, like I am operating and my first assistant is there, they are the most susceptible people of having this kind of injury, because once you are there in surgery, you don't know which hand comes from where, and you might be taking a suture over there and the needle may go straight inside the finger. So, but we all, the surgeons, are very much susceptible for these kind of injuries, and suture account for 77% of these injuries, and most of the time they occur while we are closing the fascia or the muscle, because after a lengthy surgery we are in a hurry to close the abdomen very fast. So that's why at that time our reflexes also might go slow. So that's why most of these injuries are self-inflicted, our faults, because we are in a hurry. But the main, that the surgeons who get these kind of injuries, most of them, they do not even report such injury. That's why they do not bother to get their hepatitis B status also then afterwards. So that's why they get infections post-operatively. So nevertheless, the risk of individual surgeons getting infected with HCV remains very, very small. Even in the areas where there is extremely high prevalence of the disease, the estimated probability for such transmission is very, very low, less than 1% per year. And these over a 35-year professional career of a surgeon, which is generally seen as a 35-year professional career for a surgeon, the overall risk is hardly 1%. But of course, if you get infected with hepatitis C, whether you are in this 1% criteria also, then also the things may go very, very bad for them. So it is not a good thing. You have to be very careful. You have to be very vigilant. And how to be vigilant? You have to take care of the standard precautions. So all these patients who are having hepatitis, every body secretion, including blood, body fluids, everything, tears, everything, they are basically having some or the other component of hepatitis virus inside them except the sweat, and they have to be taken with care. And we already know the principles of hand hygiene, the use of gowns, gloves, face shields, eye protections. They are to be used while we are operating and tackling these patients. And also safe injection practices. Safe injection practices means you should know how to clean that area, what to do with the syringe and the needle afterwards, because sometimes you get into the habit of placing the cap of the needle again back after the use. Never ever place the cap of the needle again back on the needle, because you try 10 times on a sterile needle, 1 out of 10 times you will definitely get that injury, because your eyes may deceive you and the needle will not go into the cap, it will enter your finger. So never get into the practice of putting the cap on the needle back. You just after the use of that needle, you have to take out the needle and put it in a puncture proof container which contains sodium hypochlorite. Never get into the habit of burning this needle like with electronic burners are there. It is now a practice which is not being used at all. No need to burn these needles because it causes aerosol spread and it will also cause infection. So that's why sodium hypochlorite solution has to be used for these needles. So CDC also recommends hand hygiene, washing with soap and water for 1 minute before examining the patient and after examining the patient is the best practice. And the use of alcohol based hand sanitizers, especially with isopropyl alcohol, because ethyl alcohol is also available these days, but use isopropyl alcohol more than 70%. They are to be used in current times also, and with all hepatitis B, hepatitis C patients, use those 70% isopropyl alcohol type of constituents. They are going to save you. For isopropyl alcohol, you have to take 3 ml of solution on your hand and you have to just scrub your hand for 20 seconds. With soap and water, you have to scrub your hands for 1 minute. This is a common kind of board which is present in the wards. If it is not present on a patient, you as a medical student will go to the ward and you will be allotted a case to see. So once you go to the ward and you find that this patient is probably infected with hepatitis B, so this board should be there. If this board is not there, then you can just go and touch this patient, and if you are having some cut or some kind of abrasion on your hand, then you can also get infected. So it is the kind of bad practice if it is not available over there on the bed, but this board should always be there so that these patients are isolated of hepatitis B and hepatitis C, so that when you enter the ward, you know this patient is not to be touched like that, because we are in the habit of examining the patients without gloves. Standard precautions or surgical precautions, you can say, like surgical precautions while there inside the operation theater, you need to have double latex gloves. When we talk of double latex gloves, it is recommended that the inner glove should be one size bigger than your normal hand size. So if you are having a size of 7, the inner glove should be, which is to be worn, is 7.5, and the outer glove should be of your normal size. This will not strain your hand. And if the surgery goes on for a long time, then you should change both the gloves every hour, and then you need to have a kind of PP kit kind of thing which you can use, like HIV kit is also there without the hood. And these days, after the coronavirus threat, now the hazmat suits have come now. So hazmat suit can also be worn, which has got a hood. Then a face mask along with a goggle is necessary to take care of your eyes also. And these gowns which are there, they are to be full length gowns with shoe covers, and the drapes which are used for the patient should be disposable because they cannot be washed and they cannot be reused. If you want to reuse them, then you have to dip them in sodium hypochlorite or bleaching powder for almost an hour. So inadvertent pricks, cuts, that should be bled. They should not be sucked, like you put it inside your mouth and then you start sucking it, taking out all the virus inside your mouth. No point in doing such kind of things. But you should straight away go to the wash basin, wash it with soap and water and iodine for 5 minutes so that the maximum prophylaxis can be given over there. And then followed by the immunoprophylaxis if the patient, if the doctor or the sister is not having that kind of prophylaxis before, she has not taken. So these interventions that can limit the transmission are that mandatory testing of hepatitis B and C in all patients who are admitted to the ward, especially those who are going for surgery. So these 2 tests are definitely, and the third test that we do these days is HIV. Along with that HIV, we are now started doing COVID-19 RT-PCR test also. So now 4 tests are mandatory for all the patients who are being operated. Actually, this concept of hepatitis B and C was ignored for a long time, but after the HIV threat, we started practicing hepatitis B and C more seriously. So selection of less invasive procedures are going to help, like laparoscopic surgeries, because there the needle stick injuries are less, and alternatives to needles and sharps like can be there, like with the staplers, with the tapes and the glues, they can be there. We can replace the sharp needles with blunt suture needles also, and the instrument should be used while doing surgery rather than a hand for retraction. And always have a neutral zone for passing the sharps, like the sister is giving you a surgical blade. Now the practice is totally stopped for last 15 years of transferring the blade hand to hand. You have to give the blade or any sharp material in a kidney tray. So the sister, if you ask the sister, give me a scalpel, she puts it into a kidney tray and gives you the kidney tray. You have to lift the scalpel from the kidney tray. So that is the protocol that should be followed. There are some kind of anesthetic concerns also for all these patients that also should be known, because these patients of hepatitis B and C are for high morbidity and mortality because of the stress of surgery and effect of general anesthesia. So especially in those patients who are decompensated liver wise, and if the liver is decompensated, the type of anesthesia that is to be used has to be well defined. So first of all, you can do a risk stratification of the patients with liver disease with Childs-Brooks criteria and the scoring. And those patients who have got class C cirrhosis, they are to be avoided. Of all the inhaled anesthetics, halothane and enflurane appears to reduce the hepatic artery blood flow the most. So that's why it is better to use a better anesthetic agent like isoflurane, sevoflurane and desflurane, because they are more safer for the anesthesia part and they cause less of hepatotoxicity. For muscle relaxant, atracurium can be used in place of vicuronium and other things. And drugs like morphine, methadone, and benzodiazepines and barbiturates should be used with caution. So these are the kind of things which are anesthetic concerns, and these patients should be benefited. So for preoperative assessment, we have to find out that if the patient is suffering from acute renal failure, hypoxia or cardiomyopathy, or with severe coagulopathy, severe hepatitis, then we cannot do surgery in these patients till the stabilization is done. Then we have to see for the child PUC criteria. If it falls in class B, then we have to avoid surgery. Use sedatives and neuromuscular blocking agents with caution. And the anesthetic complaints, the concerns are basically you have to correct the coagulopathy with vitamin K and fresh frozen plasma if these patients are having too much prolonged prothrombin time, and they should have a good platelet level also. Along with that, they should have good renal function, electrolyte should be normal. And post-operatively, we have to see that there is no blood loss after surgery, there is no hypotension in these patients, and we have to monitor for the signs of liver failure post-operatively, or worsening jaundice or encephalopathy or ascites. So it is very important to take care of these patients also of hepatitis B and C. So this is the patient perspective. So in a nutshell, all the wounds which are basically injured at the time of surgery for a healthcare worker, they are basically to be cleaned with water and soap. Then we have to do the assessment of the infection risk, and then we have to proceed for post-exposure management that we have already discussed. So some points to remember: that a patient with known hepatitis B, hepatitis C infection should probably the last patient of the day to undergo surgery, because these patients, if you use on as the first case on the surgical table, then it may probably infect the whole OT table only. And all healthcare workers performing high risk procedures as defined by the appropriate professional organization should be aware of their serological status. So every surgeon should be aware of the serological status, and surgeons as such are more prone to these kind of blood-borne diseases, but the risk of HCV is small, so you don't have to be scared while operating these patients. But one thing I will like to definitely tell you, we are always wearing those impermeable gowns. So these impermeable gowns means that these gowns are there which will not allow the blood to seep through into your skin. But what happens also that if the length of the surgery is long, then these impermeable gowns are also transmitting the blood to your skin also. So that's why you don't have to be very close contact with the OT table. You have to be a little bit far from the OT table so that you do not get that kind of soakage. So prevention of HCV is currently the only possible means by which we can take care, and surgeons have a duty of care to every patient, and no one should be denied appropriate medical treatment because of their HBV and HCV status. So to conclude, the surgeon should continue to use the highest standard of infection control involving the most effective sterile barriers, universal precautions, and scientifically accepted measures to prevent blood exposure. Surgeons should know their HBV immunization and they should get it done, and they should also know about the antibody status. As surgeons who have not been immunized and have not been previously infected with HBV should be immunized for hepatitis B virus. So we pledge on this World Hepatitis Day to test, treat, and to cure hepatitis. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you so much, sir. We could never have had such an amazing understanding of the topic. But before we conclude, I would like to put forward a few doubts that were posted by the students in the comment section. So
Okay.
may I proceed with the
Yes.
questions?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So the first question goes like this: what are the precautions we should take in the ward when dealing with a hepatitis patient? You have already answered it, but you may repeat the.
Yeah, I will like to suggest on this thing that it's a cumulative responsibility of the doctor and the surgeon to take care of such kind of patients. So while these patients are being admitted, First of all, the patient has to be admitted in an independent area, which is little bit isolated, where they cannot mix with most of the patients. Number two, the nursing barrier board has to be placed so that everyone, whether it's a sister or sister trainee or some doctor or doctor trainee is there, they can be prevented with these things. Third thing is that while examining such kind of patients, you have to wear gloves. You have to first sanitize your hands, wear gloves, and better to wear double gloves and have a face shield so that no droplet spread comes to your eyes also. Then only you can see these patients. So these prophylaxis are to be taken for sisters who are generally giving IM injections, IV injections to them. In those cases also, they have to do these things with a sanitizer and gloves only, with a face shield.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for the important advices. Now, the second question is, what are the indications for liver transplant in a patient of hepatitis?
For basically liver transplantation is basically done for these patients who are having hepatitis B and C, where the antiviral therapy interferon has actually not been proven successful. So in those patients like who are having acute liver failure, chronic liver disease, those patients who are having alcoholic liver disease, those patients where there is hepatic malignancy or metabolic liver disorders, these patients are those where the liver transplantation is basically indicated.
Yes, yes. So with that, we have the last question. What is the most severe post-op complication of surgical resection of hepatocellular carcinoma?
Hepatocellular carcinoma, if you do a liver transplantation,
So, sir, surgical resection. What is the most
surgical,
common?
okay, you want to do hepatectomy.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hepatectomy, surgical dissection means you want to remove the liver, na?
Yes,
Or
sir.
any surgical excision.
Yes, sir.
Hepatectomy. So the most common complication occurs while doing hepatectomy because you are going to remove the liver, then it should be ascites or pleural effusion, because what happens, there is portal hypertension after that. So that's why it is important to take care of ascites and pleural effusion.
Yes. Okay. So with that, we are done with all the questions. Thank you so much, sir, for being a part of this event and blessing us with your knowledge and experience. With this, I would like to end this very successful event by thanking all the audience for attending this workshop. Not to forget, if you have missed any of the days of the workshop, the discussions will soon be available on the YouTube page of IMA MSN UP. Certificates for participation will be shared soon. Taking farewell, I would like to thank all of our great speakers for sharing their knowledge with us. I would also like to thank my Statify team and all the other members involved who have helped in making this event a huge success. And the biggest thanks to our state convener, Dr. Rajneesh Raj, and our state general secretary, Dr. Rahul Anand, for mentoring our way through each and every successful event of Certify. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to our state president, Dr. Rajneesh Raj, sir. Sir, please.
Thank you for this wonderful session. Special thanks to our beloved Dr. Salaf sir for making this event a memorable ending.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Rather, I should thank you for
A big
giving
round of applause to our
opportunity.
attendees. Sir, one sir. A big round of applause for our attendees for handling data of all these days and keep counting in it. Lastly, I would like to extend our warm thanks to IMA Uttar Pradesh and our National IMA Mission, along with our IMA state team, so that they are continuously helping us and so that we can overcome with all these activities. Lastly, I want to thank you everyone again. Looking forward for your greater participation with us. Now, I'd like to hand over to Rahul.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Shalabh sir. Thanks a lot. As we have to the end of the 5-day running workshop, I would like to congratulate all the participants and the team for a successful event. Thanks to our respected Dr. Shalabh sir, Dr. A.K. Anuragi, Dr. Savita Agarwal, Dr. Ravi Shankar Tyag Gupta, Dr. Ravikant Tiwari, and Dr. Shiv Joshi for taking out their time in due course to enlighten us with the topic bioethics and hospital management. I would like to thank our state IMA leaders, Dr. Ashok Rai sir, Dr. Jayant Sharma sir, and Dr. Sharad Agarwal sir for their constant guidance and support. Not forgetting my colleague, Dr. Rajneesh Raj, State Convener, IMA MSN UP, whose never giving up attitude has cemented MSN in the UP. And yes, the best team of Harsh and Harsh, along with Shashwat and Shashwat, along with Abhinya, Sneh, Harshit, Jay and Arjit, who work day and night to make this workshop going. Followed by Shakshi, Megha, and Vidur and Akash. You make a great team and for your constant. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sneh. Thank you so much for
Thank
moderating and updating me for everything, because Sneh has been in constant touch with me, and she has been just telling me everything. Do this, and she has scolded me also in between that. Why did you leave in between?
Sir, I did not scold.
No, I'm just joking. Bye-bye then.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord, sir.
Thank you, sir.
एक मिनट, शाश्वत तुझे क्या हुआ?
Should I end the meeting?
हाँ, we should end it.
हाँ, मैंने सारी फोटोज ले ली.
हाँ.